Today we are going to practice solving equations. You guys should hopefully be pretty good at solving equations by now. You've done them for a while in math, but we're just going to review because we're going to be using steps like this a lot this year with solving different equations. So just remember when you are solving an equation, what that means is that you're finding the value of the variable, and usually we use x, but we can use other letters, that makes the equation true. So to solve an equation, we're going to isolate the variable onto one side. So when it says to isolate, that means to get it by itself. So we do this by creating equivalent equations. So that means when we perform something on one side of the equation, you have to do it to the other in order for it to stay equal. So the operation that we perform, we do it on both sides to make sure that it's balanced. So when solving for a variable, what that really is saying is to just get that variable by itself. So to isolate it on one side of the equation. Let's practice a few. We're going to start with some easier ones, and then we're going to move on to some harder ones. So as we're doing these, the steps to solving these equations, so if there are any parentheses, you want to get rid of them by using the distributive property. So that means to multiply things through. If there's any like terms, remember to combine them. So remember, like terms, they need to be the same type of variable with the same type of exponent, or if they're constants, which are just numbers, we can combine those. Or if there's any fractions, most of us don't like fractions, so we want to get rid of them. So you'll get rid of a fraction by just multiplying both sides by whatever the denominator is. So if your denominator is a 2, you'll times everything by a 2. And is there a number that is added or subtracted with the variable? You're going to do the opposite to get rid of it. So if something's being added, you're going to subtract it. If something's being subtracted, you're going to add it. And then is the variable being multiplied or divided? Same thing, you're going to do the opposite operation. So if you're timesing by 2, in order to get rid of it, you're going to divide by 2. If you're dividing by 3, to get rid of a divide, you're going to multiply by 3. So you're just always doing the opposite of whatever you're given. So basically, you're going to start on one side of the equation with the variable on it and get rid of everything else by doing the opposite operation. So, like I said, we're going to start with some easier ones. These are just one-step equations. And we call them one-step equations because you just have to do one thing in order to solve. So if I'm solving for x here, right now x is being multiplied by a 3. So in order to get it alone, I need to get rid of that 3. So since the operation is timesing, the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So I need to divide by 3 on both sides in order to solve. So when I divide a 3 by a 3, they cancel, and we just get x is equal to 6 divided by 3, which is 2. And then you're done. So we like the one-step ones because they're really easy. So on this one, if I'm solving for x, again, to isolate it, I need to get rid of everything that's with it. So right now, the only thing that's with the x is this plus 2. So the opposite of adding 2 is subtracting 2. So if I subtract 2 on this side, I also need to subtract 2 on the other side. And then I usually put the little line underneath it. Those cancel, and then the only thing left on the left side is x. And then on the right side, we have 8 subtract 2, which is 6. So x equals 6 is our answer. And then if you want, you can go ahead and pause the video and do these practice problems if you feel like you need more practice. But I feel like those ones are pretty straightforward, so I don't want to take the time to do them. Let's move on to some two-step ones. These ones are going to have 2 steps you have to do in order to solve. So when you're doing two-step ones, the order does matter on which step you do. If I look at this first problem, 4x minus 7 equals 9, to get x by itself, I need to get rid of this 4 and I need to get rid of this 7. But the tricky thing is, if I tried to get rid of this 4, I would need to do it by dividing by 4. But I would have to divide everything on this side by 4, which would mean I would divide 7 by 4, and that would make a messy fraction. So instead of dividing by 4 first, we want to get rid of the 7 first. So to get rid of a minus 7, we're going to add 7. Those 7's cancel, and then on the left side, we just have this 4x left over that we're going to bring down. And then we have 9 plus 7, which is 16. And then now, because the 4x is by itself, when I divide by 4, I'm not going to have anything messy happen. The 4 is just going to cancel. And again, we still do it to each side. So on the left side, we have x, and then 16 divided by 4 is 4. And that's my answer. Okay, let's try another one. This time x is on the right side of the equation, and that's fine, it doesn't matter. We're still trying to get this one alone. So again, when you have a multiplying and an add or subtract step, you need to do the add or subtract step first. That way when we divide by 2, we don't create a gross, messy fraction. So add 3 first to get rid of the minus 3. Those cancel. And then just the 2x comes down. And then we have 11 plus 3, which is 14. And then now we can divide by 2 because it's just going to go in even. And then 14 divided by 2 is 7. So 7 is equal to x. So last time we talked about our order of operations, PEMDAS, you remember? Parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, we put in one step, and add and subtract, we put in one step. So when you're just solving a problem that has just numbers in it, no variables, so they're saying to do like 5 plus 2 divided by 7, you use this order of operations where you go from P down to your add and subtract step. But when you're solving for a variable, an equation like this, you actually go backwards. So we're actually starting at our add subtract step, then our multiply divide step. So just kind of keep that in mind. So on this one's kind of a tricky one. X is down here in the denominator. We don't want to have x stay in the denominator. So if you remember on the last paper, I said that if there's a fraction, you want to get rid of the fraction. We don't like having fractions. And the way you get rid of a fraction is just timesing by whatever the denominator is, which is x in this case. So I'm going to times both sides by x, because when I times this by x and I have a divide by x, remember multiplying and dividing cancel each other, so they go away. So the only thing left on this left side now is just a 6. And then 3 times x is just going to be a 3x. But we're still trying to get x alone. So right now, x is being multiplied by 3, so we need to get rid of that 3, and the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So you get 6 divided by 3, which is 2, and 2 is equal to x. And you're done. Okay, number 8, we've got another fraction here. So again, we don't like fractions, so the first thing we want to do is get rid of the fraction just by timesing by whatever that denominator is. So we're going to times by 2 on each side, because that times by 2 and the divide by 2 will cancel, leaving just the top left over. So x plus 3 is left over and comes down. And then on the right side, we have 6 times 2, which is 12. And then we're still trying to get x alone. So to get x alone now, we need to get rid of the plus 3 by subtracting 3. Those cancel, and we get x is equal to 12 minus 3, which is 9. And there's your answer. Okay, and they're getting messier. So on this one, again, we want to get rid of that fraction, because you're probably like having anxiety just looking at the fraction. So to get rid of it, we're going to times by the denominator, which is a 2. And make sure you do it to both sides, because this times by 2 cancels with the divide by 2. And then whatever was in the top is still going to just come down and be the same. And then on the other side, we had 2 times 6, which is 12. And then now we're still solving for x. So we're going to first do the add or subtract. So in this case, we have a subtract 6. So to get rid of that subtract 6, we're going to add 6 to each side. So though that 6 cancels. On the left, we have 12 plus 6, which is 18. And then we have just the 2x left over on the right side. And so now we can do our divide by 2. The 2's cancel, so we just get x alone, which is what we're looking for. And then 18 divided by 2 is 9. And there's our answer. So that was actually a 3-step problem. We times by 2, then added the 6's, and then divided by 2. Okay, last one of these. So here we have a fraction, but if you look at this minus 2, it's not a part of the fraction. So if I just started by timesing by x, I would get a messy thing where I have to times this whole thing by x. And so I can't just cancel because this 2 is over here. So really, before we can get rid of that, we need to get rid of this 2. So we're going to add the 2 over to get rid of the minus 2. So then on this left side, and be careful with your sign here, we have a negative 16. When we add 2 to it, we get a negative 14. So then on this side, we have 14 divided by x. So now that this fraction is by itself, we can get rid of it. So we had to get rid of that 2 first so that the fraction was alone. That way, when we do times by x, those are just able to cancel with each other, and we didn't have something over here on the side. So I need to times this side by x as well, but don't forget that negative. Again, that's really easy to forget that. So I get x times negative 14, which is a negative 14x. And then on the right side, we just have the 14 left over. So now, to get x alone, we need to get rid of this negative 14, and they are being multiplied, not subtracted, even though there's a negative there. 14 times x is what is happening. So to get rid of a times, we need to divide by a negative 14. So those cancel, and we get x just back. But then on this side, we also need to divide by a negative 14. So we know that a number divided by itself is just 1, but we had that negative there. So positive 14 divided by negative 14 is negative 1. And that's your answer. So that one was kind of a tricky one too, lots of steps there. So more than just 2 steps. So when you are thinking combining like terms, this means you need to get your x's together and your numbers together. So let's practice doing that a little bit because it shows up a lot in equations. On this one, you have x's on both sides. So when you're trying to solve for x, which one do you solve for when there's 2 of them? So first, before we get to solving, we're going to combine our like terms. Remember, variables, as long as they're the same letter and same exponent, those are going to be like terms. And then your constants are going to be like terms as well. I usually try to bring the smaller amount over to the bigger amount just because that helps keep everything positive. So like looking at the 13 and the 4, since this is the smaller one and 4x, I'm going to minus the 4x over to the bigger amount. So that cancels, and I get 13 minus 4x, which is 9x. But then we have this plus 2 here still, and we have this 38 here. So now I'm going to move this 2 over by subtracting. Again, we always just do the opposite. So those cancel, kind of running out of space. And we get 9x is equal to 38 subtract 2, which is 36. Let me come over here. So we have 9x is equal to 36. And then now we can get rid of that 9 by dividing by 9. And we get x is equal to 4. Okay. So we just kind of have that first little step of getting your x's together and your numbers together, and then once you get to that point, you're just solving for x like we were practicing before. So here on this problem, we have 4x minus 3 is equal to 2x plus 3. Again, I like to usually move the smaller x over to the bigger x, so I'm going to minus the smaller 2x over to this side. That way, when I subtract these, 4 minus 2 is positive. We don't have to deal with a negative number. So we get 2x minus 3 is equal to 3, which was left over here. And then now we're just solving for x still. So let's get rid of this minus 3 and add it over here to combine our numbers. So I have the 2x left over on the left side, and then 3 plus 3 is 6. And then one more step, we need to get rid of that 2 by dividing by 2. And then we get x is equal to 3. And there's your answer. And then one last one. I want to get my x's together. So I see here's the smaller amount. This time the bigger amount is on the right side. So let's move the 2x over to here. Right now it's a negative 2x, so the opposite is going to be adding it. So those cancel. Remember to bring down the 4. Then we have 6x plus 2x, which is 8x. And then we have the plus 3. And then still just trying to get x alone. So I have the 8 and the 3 to get rid of. remember we're going to do the add one first. So to get rid of a plus 3, we need a minus 3. Those cancel. 4 subtract 3 is 1. Okay, and then now to get rid of this times by 8, to get x alone, we need to divide by 8. So we just get x is equal to 1/8, and that's okay that it's a fraction. That'll just be your answer. And usually for your answers, they're going to have you just keep it as a fraction rather than get an ugly decimal. So just keep it as a 1/8 and you're good. Okay, really quick, sometimes you do not have the same variable on the same side of the equation. Sometimes you have the same variable on the same side of the equation. So don't solve the problem the same way as we were just doing those last ones. We don't need to move it to a different side if they're already on the same side. So like if I look at this problem here, both of these x's are on the left side of the equal sign. So if I started moving one of them over to here, that would just make my problem more messy. So we're just going to start by combining them on the same side. We don't even need to move anything over. If I have 2 x's and I add 4 more x's, I have a total of 6 x's. And then we have our plus 6 is equal to 12. So I can just jump straight to combining them. I don't need to subtract or add anything to the other side. And then from here, it's just like what we were doing before. We're just trying to solve for x. So first we can get rid of the plus 6 by subtracting 6. So those cancel and we get 6x is equal to 6. Let me write it over here. So then to get the 6 gone, we're going to divide it. We get x is equal to 6 divided by 6, which is 1. Okay, let's look at another one. So on this one, remember, here's our equal sign. I know some people even draw like a line down the side. We don't need to move an x over here when there isn't one to combine it with. They're both on the left side of that equal sign. So we're just going to go straight into combining those two x's. So if I have a negative 3x and then I'm subtracting one more x, it's going to get more negative and we're going to be left with a negative 4x. So both of these together, they make a negative 4x. But then we also have 2 different numbers on the same side. So I can also just go straight into combining those as well. So if I have 20 and a 4, that's going to combine to be 24. And we're just all on one side of the equal sign. So remember, on the other side, we have the 44. So we'll bring that down. Once you get everything combined, we have our x's together, and then we have our numbers together. We're good to just solve like normal. So if I'm trying to get x alone now, we're going to do the plus one first. So to get rid of a plus 24, we're going to minus 24 from each side. So those cancel, and we're left with a negative 4x here on the left side. And then 44 subtract 24 is 20. And then now to get x by itself, we need to get rid of this. Remember, it's being multiplied, even though there's a negative here. To get rid of a times by a negative 4, we're going to divide by a negative 4. So a common mistake I see on problems like this is when they see the negative 4, they try to add it. But remember, when you have a number right next to a variable like that, they're being multiplied. So the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So don't fall into that little trap right there. So those negative 4's cancel, x is alone now, and 20 divided by negative 4 is going to be a negative 5. So careful with your signs. And then one last problem like this, and then we'll be done for today. Remember, here's your equal sign. If you have x's on the same side, you're just going to go straight to combining them. You don't need to move them over here. So I have 4 x's, and I'm adding 12 x's. So 4 plus 12 is 16. So those combine to be 16 x's. And then we only have one number on the left side, so there's nothing to combine it with. So then on the right side, we just have that 26. So once everything is combined, you're good to just start isolating x, getting it by itself. And you do that by doing this one first, the add or subtract. So if I have a minus 6, we're going to add 6. The 6's cancel, and we have the 16x left over. And then 26 plus 6 is 32. And then last step, right now we have 16 times x. So the opposite of that is to divide by 16. those 16, they cancel with each other and we get x alone, and then 32 divided by 16 is 2. And you're done. So hopefully that was a good review of different types of equations you'll come across before we start moving on to anything new this year. But go ahead and get started on your homework, and then if you do have any questions, again, please feel free to reach out to me. That is what I'm here for. So hope you guys are having a great day. See you later.